Good morning, good evening, good day, everyone. Once again, we meet, and once again, it seems like we just met yesterday. This sort of pandemic corona time frame that we have at the moment. The world is opening up, but the virus, the cases of COVID-19 are spiking throughout the world in places such as India, in Russia, and of course in the United States, in Brazil, and actually especially in the United States. It's basically the countries are hemorrhaging now cases. The United States in the last couple days actually reported the highest number of cases in a 2-day period. It's incredibly disturbing. It just shows that we are not done with this, and if the world is to open up, it has to be done in an incredibly intelligent and safe way. Otherwise, we see what is actually happening now. I read yesterday that, this morning I read that in Germany, 2 areas were closed down because of spikes of infection. Now, I just happened to go back of looking through books I had for years, and I remembered reading this. This is a book in 1993, Emerging Viruses. I don't know if you can see that. This I read, and at that time, science already had a very good idea about the issues of emerging viruses, of different new viruses coming in, about viruses jumping from animals to people, etc., etc., and about research which was needed to be done in order to protect ourselves. But was any of that done? Some of it was, but by and large not enough. I was also just reading about the response to the 1918 swine flu epidemic, and what at that time doctors and medical science recommended that you had to do in order to get through that pandemic that time. And of course that was very deadly. There were a few million fatalities in a 3-year period. And what were the recommendations? Social distancing, wearing masks, washing hands. Have we learned anything in the last 100 years or more? It's really unbelievable. In any case, that's enough of that perhaps for now. Just please, everyone, we still must be careful. And actually, just as a sort of final little statement in my soapbox platform that I'm on right now, the world is finding that there are more serious cases now among young people, among kids. This is very, very frightening, I must say. Okay, I put this book away, and I just go to another one. I made a mistake in the last one. This is the book that I had meant to mention, by Nicholas Slonimsky. Yes, it's a lexicon of musical invective. It's very cute, and this has to do with some contemporary criticisms of Brahms. And I mentioned that I thought it was the A major serenade, but in fact, the two passages which are particularly kind of amusing, I would say, refer both to the first serenade of Brahms, that's D major, and this Opus 11, and the First Symphony. And this is what I will read. And they both happen to be reviews from Boston. So here, it is. This is from the Boston Gazette, January 24, 1878. The First Symphony of Brahms seemed to us as hard and as uninspired as upon its former hearing. It is mathematical music, evolved with difficulty from an unimaginative mind. How it ever came to be honored with the title of the 10th Symphony, that would be of Beethoven, of course, is a mystery to us. This noisy, ungraceful, confusing, and unattractive example of dry pedantry before the masterpieces of Schubert, Schumann, Mendelssohn, Gade. I pronounced that incorrectly, but I have no idea how to pronounce this Danish composer's name, Gaal, or something like that. I apologize to anybody who's listening from Denmark. Or even the reckless and overfluent Raff. Absurd. All that we have heard and seen from Brahms' pen abounds in headwork without a glimmer of soul. It is possible that as we grow more familiar with this symphony, it may become clearer to us. But we might pore over a difficult problem in mathematics until the same result was reached, without arriving at the conclusion that it is a poetic inspiration. Quite something, I guess. The Boston Gazette didn't really like Brahms. Okay. Now, another Boston paper at that time, the Daily Advertiser, and this is October 31st, 1882. And this as the musical people, as a rule, have not as yet got educated by the music of the future, up to the point where they may enjoy passage after passage, bereft of all tonality, by meandering through doors of modulation, around corners of accidentals, and through mazes of chromatics that lead nowhere in particular, unless it be to the realm of giddiness. They long occasionally to come out into the sunlight, or to emerge upon some scene where recognizable objects may be viewed, grouped, or marshaled somewhat according to nature and understood laws of unity and symmetry. There is so much of this ultra-modern kind of writing in the Brahms Serenade, Opus 11, that with its inordinate length, its total effect is wearisome. The general treatment in this serenade is, after Brahms' usual fashion, abstruse and intellectual. The work, on a first hearing at least, is largely unintelligible. Well, another newspaper in Boston didn't really like Brahms. And here's another just the final one. I can keep going because they're actually incredibly amusing. Oh yes, these all come from Boston. The First Symphony of Brahms seems to strive after the unattainable. It is full of irritant and restless discords. It has strange, climbing, grasping phrases which seem to be trying to drag down something which still glides upward from their reach. Its pastoral motives often break away in suggestion of storm and confusion. The strings are frequently urged to the very top of their compass, and at times, as in the first and last movements, a sort of Walpurgis night sweeps down and whirls everything away in a rhythmic chaos. I have a feeling that the performance was not very good. This, anyway, is Boston again. The Daily Advertiser. This is 1883. And then I just have to do one more. I'm very sorry. I keep going on with this, but it's just too unbelievable. Again, C minor symphony. This has got a lot of terrible reviews in Boston. This is Boston Herald, December 31st, 1883. There is in Brahms' C minor symphony an iteration and reiteration of mere fragmentary ideas, which makes it simply tiresome, and the opening movement is suggestive of the Lord Chancellor's song in Iolanthe. The orchestra did wonderfully good work in all this tiresome waste of endless harmony. Okay, I put this away now. I recommend this book because it has incredibly cute things about contemporary criticism of all our sort of great composers of the past. That's like European, not very, very funny. Okay, that's enough of that. Let me see. I have to say that I'm a bit disorganized, unorganized, I guess, this morning. I seem to say that a lot. I think that's something about Friday at 10 a.m. New York that is, I would wish it would be some later time today, perhaps. I would be a little more better organized. Anyway, we would like to move today to Stravinsky. I kept on approaching them the last couple of live streams, but today we will actually go through this. And what I want to explore is the relationship between tradition and innovation, between schooling and inspiration. That's it. Now, of course, Stravinsky, I have a few more quotations, things like that, was a force of nature. He was a remarkable composer. Elliott Carter, also a remarkable composer himself, he told me in one of our many conversations that we had together, he said that Stravinsky perhaps was the only composer of the 20th century, at least, who never wrote a bad piece. Everything he wrote was really a masterpiece. And that even includes his 3 pieces for clarinet. And these 3 pieces is what I will basically talk about now. But first, a tiny bit of history. Stravinsky came from a musical family. His father, Fyodor Stravinsky, was a very well-known baritone, very good friend of the St. Petersburg musical establishment, and a very good friend of Rimsky-Korsakov, who was, of course, the major force in the late 19th century in St. Petersburg, if not in the whole of Russia. Of course, we had Tchaikovsky as well, but Rimsky-Korsakov was more politically active and active as a teacher as well. So, Fyodor's son, Stravinsky, was an erstwhile composer, and he studied with other people and then was introduced by his father to Rimsky-Korsakov. Rimsky-Korsakov took him under his wing, but thought that he was not ready, not good enough in a certain way, to be enrolled in the conservatory. So he came to the lessons and was really a kind of private student, but was part of this. But little by little, he impressed Rimsky-Korsakov more and more. And he was known to be a wonderful orchestrator. So I have to say I'm just doing this in a very kind of superficial way, but it's perhaps okay for an introduction. When Diaghilev, who had founded the Ballet Russe and was starting his series of concerts and ballet performances in Paris, he was interested in a ballet with a Russian theme. He first approached the composer Lyadov, who was also very well known, maybe the most well known after Rimsky-Korsakov in St. Petersburg. Or actually, I should not say that. First, he approached Cherepnin, another very well known composer, and he had this idea of this plot with the Firebird, this kind of mythical creature that's part of Russian folklore. In any case, Cherepnin began it and then sort of was lost interest. He went to Lyadov, and Lyadov was somehow busy. So he looked at different other composers at that time, and then finally he thought, well, might as well talk to this young fellow, Stravinsky, who was doing some orchestrations, and he thought that he could sort of cobble together some Russian folk tunes, etc., and create a decent ballet, something like that. So Stravinsky, who was at that time working on an opera, was faced with a bit of a dilemma. Should he continue the opera, or should he drop everything and write this ballet that Diaghilev wanted? Of course, he took the challenge of writing the ballet, and very soon after, he came out with The Firebird, in Russian Zhar Ptitsa. It's in 1910, and of course, the rest is history. This became a remarkable success and put Stravinsky on the map as maybe the rising star of Russian music. Diaghilev was tickled pink. He was so happy with the success. He immediately asked Stravinsky for a second ballet, and the next year Stravinsky wrote Petrushka. That's also had to do with Russian folk music, and this is actually rather interesting because although it was also a very big success, in St. Petersburg circles, musical circles I should say, people were not so impressed with it. They felt that it was simply a collection of, in a certain way, popular melodies and popular songs. And in fact, that is very much the case in Petrushka, although put together in an amazingly original way. I forget if I actually mentioned this earlier or not here, because I mentioned it a lot. When I was a student in Moscow, here we had different halls. At that time, there were two major halls in the Moscow Conservatory, with the large hall and then the small hall, Malizal. And the small hall was taken care of by this fellow whose name I don't think I ever knew, although I probably was told at one time, who, my apologies to some friends in Moscow, but he was always drunk. Maybe I don't even need to apologize about that. But this guy, he was the stagehand. He took care of it. He felt that this small hall was his fiefdom, almost his property in a way. And it was also the hall where you did not only have chamber music concerts, such as the Borodin Quartet I heard in the small hall, but was also a place where the students gave their recitals. And one afternoon, there was a fellow practicing the piano and practicing the three scenes from Stravinsky's Petrushka. And this fellow, this guy, this stagehand, of course, again drunk, he came running out, and so it started yelling, "How dare you? How dare you play this popular trash in this, what should I say, in this kind of church of great art." I'm thinking in Russian now. It's a храм музыки. It's great. Because he knew all these tunes that he was playing as these kind of little, popular, little kind of risque sort of melodies. This is all just little background. Okay, so then after Petrushka came in 1913 the Rite of Spring. Now the difference between the Rite of Spring and Firebrand and Petrushka is that the Rite of Spring was not actually commissioned by Diaghilev, but was Stravinsky's idea. And Diaghilev went along with it, of course, because Stravinsky at that time was a big hit that way. And after the Rite of Spring, the rest is history. In many ways, that piece changed music. And of course, in 1913, in its premiere, we had the case of there was a big scandal. It was there was a lot of booing, etc., etc., etc. What is not actually noted is that the second day, the second performance, was a huge triumph in the piece. This is really quite something that already people began to take in the power of the music of the Rite of Spring. Now, what's interesting is that after the Rite of Spring, and I have a list here that I will go through. It's not a complete list, but it will just go to sort of emphasize what I'm trying to get at. He started writing, taking from the Rite of Spring, pieces of smaller and smaller and smaller orchestrations. So, after the Rite of Spring, in 1914, you have 3 Japanese lyrics. And that's for a medium-sized chamber ensemble. 1914, also 3 pieces for string quartet. And then this song cycle, Pribautki, for small ensemble of instruments and singer voice, male voice. 1917, the Berceuse du Chat, this Lullaby of the Cat, we can call that, for just 3 clarinets and contralto. And also, at that time, you have a ragtime for 11 instruments. Then, Histoire du Soldat, 1918. And in 1918, finally, the 3 pieces. So, in a certain way, he's refining this language that he actually, in a certain way, perhaps discovered in the Rite of Spring, and pared it down until, in a certain sense, the final example is for a single instrument. The genesis of the 3 pieces is also very interesting. It's dedicated to the Swiss industrialist and patron of the arts, Werner Reinhardt. For Reinhardt was, as I think most everyone of you knows, was an amateur clarinetist. He must have been quite good. And what is interesting here is when Reinhardt was the one who actually supported Stravinsky and was the patron who funded the Histoire du Soldat. He asked for a trio version of this piece, perhaps so that he could play himself in his own home. That we don't know, but he did ask for a trio. Then Stravinsky, of course, accommodated him and wrote this suite from Histoire du Soldat for violin, clarinet, and piano. Now I'm going to get one thing which is over here. I have to go there and get back, come back, because I didn't put it in the right place. Let me put this here again. And he sketched the trio in the notebook, and in 3 pages he wrote the 3 pieces. And this is the last page of the 3rd of the pieces. I don't know if you can you see it? Yeah, I'll go.
It's kind of opposite.
What's that? No, it should not be. Is that? Does that work, or is it?
Works.
Yeah?
It works.
Okay. So you see there's the notebook,
Works.
and there's the... These. Okay. So, the 3 pieces, in a certain sense, were kind of surprise for his patron, Werner Reinhardt. It was a little present that he added to the suite there. So Reinhardt would open the notebook, for instance, and there he would find not only the suite, but the 3 pieces, sketch in a certain way for the 3 pieces. Now, what I want to do, though, is go back and speak about innovation and tradition, in a way, and how something which seems incredibly new actually does come from somewhere. And I will speak about the 3 pieces in a moment. And first I want to another little quotation, and I find this quite interesting. And this was in 1910. This is a letter that Rimsky-Korsakov's widow wrote to the elder daughter. The name of the widow is Nadezhda. That's Rimsky-Korsakov's wife. And it basically has to do with Rimsky-Korsakov's favorite student, whose name was not Stravinsky, but his name was Max Steinberg, or probably Steinberg, as it was. And she writes this way: "About Max, dear Sonia, you're deeply mistaken and jump to too hasty a conclusion. That he has talent is beyond doubt. Papa, as well as Glazunov, always regarded him as outstandingly talented. He even placed him above Stravinsky, though in particular ways Max was undoubtedly more gifted musically than Igor. He has perfect pitch, which Igor hasn't." And I will come to that in a minute. This is not something that she wrote. But she wrote that he has perfect pitch, which Igor hasn't, and he has astonishing sensitivity to beautiful harmony and fine voice leading, which again Igor hasn't. Their direction is different. Igor is very intelligent, perhaps more so than Max, but Max is more versatile, has wide interest, and knows a lot. Igor strives for novelty at all costs, Max for beauty. Okay, now why do I quote that? Of course, it's just like in the reviews of Brahms, that people can be mistaken. Even the wife of Rimsky-Korsakov, even Rimsky-Korsakov himself can be mistaken. But it also has to do with something that I find very interesting, because Stravinsky did not have perfect pitch. Okay, now if we go back in time, we find that the great Wagner, Richard Wagner, did not have perfect pitch. Going back further in time, most likely Joseph Haydn did not have perfect pitch. That's a Haydn also, like Stravinsky, always composed at the keyboard, for instance. That's things. Now, I say this only because it is possible that allowed these composers to experiment in a way. Okay, and this, let me explain what I mean by that. I go to the piano and I start with this most famous opening in Tristan and Isolde, and which was so remarkable and in so many ways revolutionary. But let's look at it carefully. Now, what would happen normally would be that. You see. So, this is actually it's elegantly voiced, but it just is a passage that leads to A major. The next one, as if he's starting again in E major, but C major. And the next one, this way. And then he goes E major. So, in fact, what is happening here is, so I find so interesting, is that he's basically going which is a very nice but very standard kind of cadence, we can call it. I'm not going to go into technically, but what is brilliant about this is that Wagner does not resolve. This was a choice. This was an experiment. And that, in a certain way, is the beginning of this amazing work of art, Tristan and Isolde. Okay. I move on now, once again, to Stravinsky, and I go to the Rite of Spring. And we have, of course, to that. And then it comes from I don't go to the beginning, which is actually very remarkable, but just this one little detail. And we have the very famous chord, which is if I do this correctly, that way. This is a wonderful Rite of Spring chord. So it starts though before that with this. And then you have that here. And then from there, we go to this. And then. So, what is he actually doing here? Where does this come from? It comes here. We start from this here. Is I'm sorry, I did something wrong. But we have here basically that way. So that's what it is. Which could be Tchaikovsky, of course. And the brilliance of Stravinsky is taking something like that again, which is, in a way, very standard, and then deciding that a lot of this piece is in E major. So we have this E flat 7. Let's put them together. And then we get that way. So again, this involves a kind of experimentation, but coming from something which is in fact rooted in tradition, but because of the experiment, takes on completely new guise. And I think the genius of Stravinsky, the genius of Wagner as well, but genius of Stravinsky now, has to do with, in a sense, an open mind, where he can experiment. He can experiment and say, oh, this is good. Oh, this is good. This is good. So I have one more quotation that I will mention. And this has to do with a conversation he had with Ravel. And I take this is actually another very, book is a little tedious, but a very good source of information, by Stephen Walsh. There are actually 2 volumes, I think, at least that I have. But this is the first volume, Stravinsky, A Creative Spring. That's speaking. Okay. So anyway, here we go again. Where is my little thing? Here. Now, Stravinsky showed Ravel his Japanese lyrics. So this is right 1914. And discussed Schoenberg's Pierrot Lunaire with him and a neighbor called Ernest Ansermet, which I spoke about last week especially. Ansermet, who was this good friend of Stravinsky, who was a mathematician and conductor, founder of the Swiss Romande Orchestra, etc., and the person who brought jazz back to France. Okay, anyway, they were intrigued by Schoenberg's way of combining major and minor chords, which Ravel thought to be perfectly acceptable, provided the minor third is at the top and the major at the bottom. Now, Stravinsky said, I don't see why you can't do the reverse. And if I want to, I can. So in other words, here's Ravel, and we have this. That way. He says, yes, this is so beautiful. And so he says, but if I want, I can do that. You see. That is genius. I mean, Ravel also was genius, but Stravinsky is genius. It's that way. Okay. Now this idea of experimenting was something I think that Stravinsky always did. He was always sort of looking for things. I actually remember also, sorry, one second. I know I'm not supposed to touch my face. But I had to do a little. What do I want to say? No, I was just thinking back to 1918, and that's the one thing I didn't read, that was one of the recommendations, not to touch your face, but maybe it was also. Anyway, okay. So Stravinsky was always looking for something in it. And there's a wonderful film about Stravinsky, and the end of the film, he's on the boat traveling between, I guess it must be the United States and most likely England at that time. I don't quite remember the details, but what I do remember is his very last quotation, where he says, I love music, but more than music, I love to compose. It's really quite something. So, now, finally, after all this big introduction, I go to the Stravinsky 3 pieces. I go to the first piece of that, and before he wrote this piece, he wrote a little duet, and I played this in the last live streams. This is a duet for 2 bassoons, Lied ohne Name, he wrote there. And I actually have, I hope I didn't put it somewhere else. But I think I should have the, here it is. You see that? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And this is very, very different from the first of the three pieces. And I'll play it once again. But I'm going to play it a half step higher than he wrote. This is the wrong. I must have it over here somewhere. Yeah, okay. So again, this is Lied ohne Name. It should be, of course, Lied ohne Namen, but Stravinsky wrote Name. So here we go. Sorry. Apologize for one little mistake in the middle. So this small little kind of just think that little piece that Stravinsky probably just tossed off. Of course, the interesting part is the way it starts already in a kind of sort of polytonal way. And here too. It moves back and forth between tonalities. Yeah. Okay. Is very different. This is very different from the first movement. But in fact, if you take this piece and squash it into one line, you actually get the first piece of the Stravinsky three pieces. I have to mention that the inspiration for my figuring this out came from a former student of mine, Michael Dowler, who's now his name is Michael Brown, from Vancouver. This is many years ago. He was a student of mine, and he was reading one of Robert Kraft's books about Stravinsky, and Kraft mentioned how these two are connected. But what Kraft didn't see was exactly how they are connected. He sort of saw that, you can take a motive here and sort of see it in the first of the pieces of Stravinsky. But in fact, you see, if you do take the piece up a half step, as I just did, I'll show you this, and this is that. Can you see it? Yeah, that's one thing. Okay. Now, this is, of course, all in concert pitch. So, I just wanted to, I have to get something else, because I forgot my chopstick. So, instead, I'll get this little Japanese pen here, and this is the ending. Let's see if I can come here. Do you see? Okay, this is the duet here. Okay. Do you see? Okay. And then you can see how he parsed all the notes out. The red come from the first bassoon part, and the blue come from the second bassoon part. Here, like that. Whoops. And I'll show you again here. This will be a little more familiar. This is the ending here. I'll take this now. And then this is with the clarinet part transposed. Okay. So that for the people, for those of you who are clarinetists, you can see that more. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Yeah, this is, you know, we need a lot more equipment to do this. This is,
Okay.
yeah. Do you see that? Okay, and I will play this first on the piano, this way. All right. Okay. So this is the ending, and then we have. And that turns in. Here, I'm sorry, I have the wrong one, so it's a little more. I don't want to make a mistake with the transposition, so I do here. So once again, we have this, and that becomes, and then. And then this goes, which turns into here. This is that way. This is a phone call we're not going to take. And then here again. There. So you can hear it. Let's let this go. Yeah, good. This is some kind of little scam that we get several times a day all over the phone. So anyway, you can see this. It's so interesting here. Now, there is, however, two notes, or there are, I should say, there are two notes which Stravinsky changed. And the ending, for instance, is here. This goes is that way, but what Stravinsky does in the clarinet. So we have here that way, but instead of A flat, he puts a D flat in the clarinet version. Then in the middle there's also one more note, which is different. And I look on those notes as, in a certain way, notes of genius. So Stravinsky is not simply doing an academic exercise where he says, oh, it'll be interesting, I just write it out this way and I get this piece. No, he's finding something that is very new there. And in order to make it sound, he has to not be simply literal, but he has to somehow tweak it this way. So instead of playing and then this way, he thought, doesn't sound good. There. Actually, no, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. This is not what I wanted to do. Sorry. That's what it would be. Yeah, that's correct. I apologize. So he thought, no. And the reason that that makes so much sense is that once he squashed it, it became a completely different piece. And what was important in this piece, although we do have that melody coming back throughout the piece here, what is most important is kind of this. Are these stepwise progressions in contrary motion that we have, going up and going down, up and down this way. And that, you go, oh, he thought, aha. And from that, I believe he got his inspiration for his next two pieces, the second and third of them. And what time is it now?
Exactly 1 hour.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that we should in fact stop now, although actually I will say just a little bit more about actually before I don't stop yet. Yeah, but just a little bit. I mean, if I start to go through the next two pieces, then it's another 2.5 hours, of course, and that's for something which in total lasts less than 5 minutes. Anyway, what is very interesting about his early manuscript is that it is in concert pitch. And not only that, he writes here, and I'll show you. I can never find it. No, I lost it. Where is it? Oh no. I have a few of them, and I lost them. Ah, here. That's why. So soon. Yeah. Here is the first of the pieces. And you'll notice that it is written in treble and bass clef. Here, maybe can you hold that a second and I will get. No. Somewhere else. Maybe here. I just wanted to show you a better example of that. Well, in any case, I don't worry about that. Okay, then I'll show you the second one. also written in the middle part, especially in both bass and treble clef. And then here's the third piece. Okay, and I shall go to the end of the third piece. It's here. Okay, now, here is the mystery we have, and that is the first piece. I go back again. It's in concert pitch, so we have. What am I doing? But anyway, that's really funny. So it starts not on, as we have on an A, but on a G flat. That way. Okay. Now the second piece also is in concert pitch. So it doesn't start on a D, but on a B that we have there. Is that way, going to B. Now the third piece starts on a B flat. Now there's a second manuscript where Stravinsky, and I'll actually show you that as well. And that's been transposed here. So you have this here first. You see it? Yeah. Okay. And I believe this manuscript is not in Stravinsky's hand myself, but it was copied. Here's the second piece here. And then we have the third piece. We're like this here. So this is that way. Okay, now this manuscript also has no notation. Well, it says, I'm sorry, it does have a notation in the title pages, so I say, that this is, says, this is in La, then in La, and then it's, the third one is in C bemol, or in B flat, you see. Okay. So Stravinsky obviously did settle on this, but the interesting question was, what was his original intention? And there is no note in this early manuscript that the last piece, all of a sudden, he writes in B flat, while the other two pieces he wrote in C. Now let's actually look at this in a little more detail. And to here we go back and we have this here. Now the first piece ends finally on a C. That way, as we have here. That way. Now the next piece is goes to B, and the last piece centers completely around B flat at the end. So he's basically going. Now we look at again innovation and tradition. So here Stravinsky is writing something which is in a way very new. It does not have kind of this kind of tonality which perhaps you see in Petrushka, you see in of course in the Firebird, and maybe even to a little bit greater degree in the Rite of Spring than this. But the question is, how did he decide to organize this piece? What is he? And if we're going from E flat to B flat, we go from here we have a nice plagal cadence. So I think this was definitely his original idea, which means, of course, that the last piece is in C. Okay? And I'm going to talk more about the second and third pieces next week, I think. And I will play you next week the three pieces as he originally intended. Okay, take care. Be well.